We talk Vladislav Gavrikov picking New York over LA with the host of Locked On New York Rangers, Jon Chik, on this crossover edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, so let's go ahead and kick off this very special crossover edition of Locked On New York Rangers and Locked On Los Angeles Kings. It's Jon Chik with Locked On New York Rangers, joined by my good friend Eddie Garcia of Locked On Kings. And Eddie, obviously the Rangers, they were connected to Gavrikov for quite some time. Free agency begins, they pounce, they get their guy. And I just wanted to get your general reaction for starters here. I mean, how tough was it to lose Gavrikov, and did you kind of see this coming? Because the Rangers were connected to him for quite some time.
They were, and I don't want to ask you about that a little bit, but I was surprised, actually. And probably because of all the things that led up to what happened. Obviously, we knew that Gavrikov was the big UFA coming up for the Kings during the season. And of course, he was asked about it. Then general manager Rob Blake was asked about it. And everybody seemed very optimistic about him staying in Los Angeles. And Rob Blake usually doesn't comment, or he didn't when he was on the job. He didn't comment a lot about contracts during the season. He would almost always say, we'll talk about that after the season. We're concentrating on the season. But he actually did come out and say he was optimistic about re-signing him, and they would take care of it after the season. But he said something he usually doesn't say, where he gave some optimism about it. So, and then in the exit interview for Gavrikov, he didn't give any kind of indication at all that he was thinking about leaving, other than to say, I'm not in a hurry. We've got plenty of time to figure things out, and that kind of thing. So I think a lot of us felt like, yeah, he's coming back. And then I know he got a new agent, he got new representation. And how much did that play into it? The Kings have a new general manager in Ken Holland. How much did that play into it? Maybe it played into it. Maybe it didn't play at all into it. So it seems like, in hindsight, maybe there were a lot of little things that we didn't pick up on that led to him deciding to go elsewhere. And it's all kind of being speculated about now. I would love to ask you if he's spoken to the media yet in New York and has been asked about it, or has given any indication of why he decided to select New York over LA. But to answer your question, I was surprised by it. I thought he was going to be re-signed. When I saw the number 7 times 7, I thought, well, the Kings could definitely pay him $7 million a year. I thought it was going to be something like, an Ivan Provorov, 8.5, maybe $9 million a year.
Yeah.
And maybe the Kings didn't like the 7 that much, 7 years, but they're in a position right now. They're talking about being, I know it might sound ridiculous for some people, for a team that hasn't gotten out of the first round since 2014, to be thinking about being a cup contender, but that's where they think of themselves. They think they've had bad luck having to run into the Oilers. They thought that they let one slip away last year. And so they think they're better than they are, maybe, or anyway, that's what they think about themselves. So I would have thought that they would give Gavrikov at least 7 times 7. And even if they didn't like the number of years, they're in it to win it now. So what do they care? Let's make the team as strong as it can be for now, and we'll worry about year 5, 6, 7 then. I mean, the GM's not even going to be around, I don't think. I think Ken Holland's here for a quick fix, couple of years. If it doesn't happen, they're going to move on to another plan. So I was surprised. I was surprised that Gavrikov did leave, and for the number that he signed for.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised that it was only 7 by 7, because you actually, just a second ago, you touched on the Provorov contract, and I saw that. I was like, oh, God, here we go, because Provorov, I think it was for 7 years at $8.5 million per season, and I would rank Gavrikov above Provorov. I mean, they're both good defensemen, but yeah, if I had to pick between the two, like the Rangers signing one or the other, I mean, I'm definitely taking Gavrikov, and I had mixed feelings on the whole thing, because it's a thin free agent market, and that kind of lends itself to the top players really, really getting paid. And I like Gavrikov, but my fear was this dude's going to get paid like he's a multi-time Norris winner, when in fact, he's a really good defenseman, but he's not at that top elite level. So when I saw the number at 7 by 7, I was feeling quite a bit better about it. Not to say that it's nothing, but we've got the rapidly rising cap as well. It keeps going up by leaps and bounds every season. So I think that helps kind of limit the damage a little bit as well. And my other concern with Gavrikov, it wasn't so much about Gavrikov as it was about next year's free agent class, because as I'm sure you know, Eddie, I mean, next year's free agent class is just wild. And not that all those guys will make it to free agency. Some of them might re-sign with their current team. You got one right there, Adrian Kempe, who's in that category. But be that as it may, man, like I want the Rangers to take their shot at, one or maybe even two of those guys. So you sign Gavrikov, and it does take out a chunk of the salary cap. But by that same token, they should have enough cap space next season where they can make a run at one of those guys. And the bottom line, I mean, the Rangers needed a defenseman like this. They're lefty. Their defensemen in general were shaky last year, but especially the left side. Keandre Miller no longer here. It feels like a move that was really, really necessary for the Rangers. And it kind of felt to me like they were the front runners, and, they went out and made it happen. And overall, I'm feeling pretty good about it.
I don't know if you saw this or not, but Elliot Friedman talked about the Kings and Rangers trying to work out a sign and trade.
Yep.
And it fell through. And my thoughts on this, and maybe you've got a better read on this than I do, is it seemed like at some point it did seem like this was going to happen and he was going to the Rangers. And it seemed like they knew it and he knew it and maybe the Kings knew it. And so I'm thinking, well, why would the Rangers give up anything for him if they know he's coming? If he's given them, however he's done it through back channels or whatever, if he's told them, I'm coming to New York, I want to go there, why would they do a sign and trade? Why would they give up anything for him? That didn't make much sense to me.
Yeah, no, I didn't want that to happen either. I actually talked about that very topic a little bit earlier today on the episode that I recorded a little bit before this. But yeah, I mean, to give up anything when you know that he wants to come here anyway. I mean, I guess if you do the sign and trade, you guarantee that you get your guy, right? I mean, that's part of it. But then again, Gavrikov doesn't have to do the sign and trade on his end.
Right. So, and yeah, the Rangers don't want to give him an 8th year, right? Because that's
the other big thing too. Yeah, because he'll be 36 when this contract ends, which getting up there a little, not ancient, but for me, like I didn't see a reason to go to an 8th year. I mean, 7's good. I'm good with 7, And when you sign somebody to a 6-year deal, a 7-year deal, an 8-year deal, and I know the CBA next year is going to limit it to, 6 and 7, depending on whether he's your guy or not. But when you go that long, you kind of accept the fact that, okay, well, this might not be so good in the last year or two of this contract, right? And so if you can avoid that, do it. Like I don't need Gavrikov when he's 37. We got him for 7 years, and the Rangers are retooling and they want to attack this window, and they fancy themselves contenders, and Gavrikov's a big part of that. But there was no reason for me to go to 8 years for Gavrikov, at least on my end.
Yeah, I agree. Has he met with the media? Has there been any quotes from him as far as why he decided to pick New York?
Oddly, no. Like as of this recording, nothing, no quotes coming out or anything like that. But my understanding, and I'll ask you about this too, Eddie, was that he had sort of a short list as far as free agent suitors are concerned. There wasn't like this big list. Some guys are just going to go to the highest bidder or whatever it might be. It sounds like he only had a couple of teams that he was really all that interested in playing for. And that too might be part of the reason why the Rangers got him in at least something of a discount. Were you hearing something similar? Seemed like some interest in the Kings, some interest in the Rangers, but not a whole ton of teams for Gavrikov.
It seems like he had zeroed in on New York, and we're all speculating now on the reasons for that. And some of the things that have been mentioned are, he's now closer to his homeland in Russia. Flying from New York to Russia is a lot closer than flying from LA to Russia.
Yeah.
He knows Igor Shesterkin and Artemi Panarin. He's got a couple of countrymen there that he could play with. There's a large Russian community, right, in New York. There's not really that in Los Angeles necessarily. And maybe, he was going to be on the second pairing in LA. Maybe he wanted to be a top pairing guy. I assume he's going to be that. I would think he and Adam Fox would make up a very nice top pairing there in New York. So maybe that was part of it as well. It seems like there might have been just a lot of little things that added up to be a big thing for him.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And I would agree with your assessment there that he'll be with Adam Fox. They didn't give him this contract to, put him on the third pairing, right? He's going to be out there with Fox. There's no other obvious in-house candidate to play with Adam Fox next season. And maybe even that, I mean, the chance to play with Adam Fox, his defense partner, that could have potentially appealed to him as well. Something I want to ask you about his game, Ranger fans and probably Kings fans and every fan really, they always want their team to get bigger, tougher, nastier, all that good stuff, right? And, Gavrikov, he's a giant 6'3", 220. I've heard different things. Is he like an overly physical defenseman? Can he bring that edge, or is he more a guy that relies on positioning and, other attributes that he has?
He is more about positioning. He's more about the cerebral part of the game, reading plays really well, being in the right place at the right time, always in a position to back up his partner. Really a smart guy. He can be physical, but he's not nasty. He's not that kind of a guy. He knows how to use his size, but he's not going to be in the box a lot. He's not that kind of guy. He's a smart player, knows what he does well, rarely is out of position. Just a very, very solid defensive defenseman. I think he's very versatile. He can play on the right side. That's what he really did in LA that opened a lot of eyes. Doughty gets hurt in the preseason. Oh my God, what are we going to do? And someone said, well, let's put Gavrikov on the right side. And we're like, why? Why would you do that? And he was amazing. He and Mikey Anderson were terrific and were a huge reason for the Kings' success this year. And I think his ability to show that versatility opened the eyes of a lot of people and probably did not hurt his, negotiating and showing, what he can do I mean, why would he play on the right side of New York? But I'm just saying he can do it if you need it. He can play that role if for something happens and you need that to happen. But just very solid, smart defensive player, always in the right place at the right time. He'll not get pushed around, that's for sure. But He's not nasty. He's not going to run guys into the wall. He's not going to give out the big, open ice hit or something like that. Offensively, I would say he's also smart in that regard. He'll jump up in a play if an opportunity arises and he'll surprise you. You'll be like, oh, who was that? That was Gavrikov. Yeah. But he has an average shot from the point. He'll hold the puck in, but he knows that's not his role. It's all about defense, and he does it really well.
Gotcha. And one more thing I definitely want to ask you about with Gavrikov is his special teams play, if he can be a go-to guy on either or both units. And we will actually get to that in just a second.
Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. FanDuel tracks your favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether it's a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like you're a part of the action. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started.
All right, so we're doing this special crossover edition here, Locked On Rangers, Locked On Kings, and we just want to thank the everydayers for always tuning in, always supporting both shows. And Eddie and I, I'm sure we're going to continue covering the offseason, all the wheelings and dealings of both teams. But Eddie, a couple more questions about Gavrikov, and then we'll move on to just some of the other offseason storylines for both teams. But special teams, the Rangers really struggled in both. The power play was 5th to last in the league after being top 3 the year before. And the PK doesn't look bad on paper, number 11 in the league, but they really collapsed late. And with Gavrikov, I mean, I see him certainly as more of a PK guy than a power play guy. Can he chip in the penalty kill? And, is that a role that he played often with the Kings? How important was he? Because I saw you guys were ranked 8th last year. So how big was he for that in that role?
Yeah, he's a big part of that. He's a great penalty killer. I can't imagine he'll play on your power play. I don't know, if he's playing on your power play, I would say that's not a good sign. I'm not saying he can't do it, but he never did it in LA, and I don't think that's something he's comfortable in. He if there's a lot of injuries and you need somebody just back there, maybe he's your guy. But I would be surprised if he's on your power play unit. Penalty kill, though, absolutely. Number 1 penalty kill guy. Great on killing penalties. Again, smart, knows when to, take chances, knows when to not, which is probably more important that, in that regard. Just makes the right decisions, always is there to support. So he'll be very, very good on your penalty kill.
Gotcha. Yeah, the only reason I brought up the power play is because the obvious choices to as far as like a defenseman on the second power play. First of all, we know Adam Fox is going to be on the top power play, but then, Keandre Miller leaves, he gets traded. Zach Jones walks after he was not qualified by the Rangers. So there's kind of an opening there. I mean, maybe Scott Morrow, they picked him up and maybe he ends up there, but we'll see. It's good to know that even in a pinch that, maybe he could do that. But yeah, the PK, again, the 11th ranking for the Rangers is very misleading because they were a mess on the PK late in the season. And whatever good ranking they got was probably due to Igor more than anything else. But I did want to also ask about Gavrikov, just as far as like his personality is concerned. Like, is this the kind of guy, like I saw a video on YouTube. I couldn't find it today, but he was like dancing around and having fun in the locker room. Is this somebody that you feel can like fit into any locker room? Because the Rangers locker room was a mess last season. So hopefully they shore that up a little bit. But is this somebody that from a personality standpoint is at least somewhat adaptable?
Yeah, he's got a great personality. He's not shy. Even though obviously English isn't his first language, you can see, you've been around players, I'm sure. You can kind of tell when they're just not real comfortable speaking English. He's very comfortable speaking English, and he has a personality. He has a very interesting goal celebration, which he doesn't do too often, but he puts his hand up to his head like he's on the phone. And I don't know who he's calling or who's calling him. Maybe he's calling his agent saying, I just scored a goal, give me some more money. But that's his goal celebration. We always kind of got a kick out of it. But he also does a very interesting thing in pregame warmup where he does like yoga poses. Like he'll get down on one knee, and I don't know. I don't do yoga, shockingly enough, by looking at me, but he'll do some sort of, some sort of pointing to the sky with one hand. And it's when he first started doing it, I think his teammates and a lot of fans were like, what is he doing? And then you just get used to it, and it's just kind of part of who he is. But he's a little bit of a character. And he was one of the guys last year that started their dancing locker room celebration after wins. I don't think they did it much this year, but it was just some kind of organic thing, probably because on the road, they were not doing that well. But anyway, he's a character. He's not flaky or anything. He's not, like that, but he does have a personality, and I think he's a fun guy to be around.
Yeah, it's honestly good to hear that, because this Ranger team this past season, I don't know how much of them you watch, but I mean, they were just so flat on certain nights, and it was just a team that was devoid of any personality. Like, I was talking about this not that long ago, but it's like, as a Ranger fan this last year, you're just trying to grab onto anything that's like entertaining or fun or cool in some way. So to get somebody that, brings a little bit of personality into the locker room, I think that's probably going to be a good thing for the Rangers for sure. As far as the Kings go, and trying to replace Gavrikov, one of the signings that you guys made is Brian Dumoulin. And what's kind of funny about that to me is, like, I had actually mentioned him as like maybe something of a fallback plan if they don't end up with Gavrikov, because veteran, steady defenseman, and there's some familiarity with Sullivan, so maybe that would make some sense. But as it turns out, you guys actually end up picking him up instead. 3 years, $4 million per season. How do you feel about Dumoulin, and can he kind of pick up the slack a little bit in terms of losing Gavrikov? Dumoulin now stepping in.
Yeah, I think you're probably more familiar with him than I am, him being mostly an Eastern Conference guy. But I know I watched him in the playoffs last year for New Jersey. I thought he was fantastic. Or maybe you could say, well, the rest of the D-corps for New Jersey wasn't that great, but I thought he was their best defenseman in the playoffs. He's won a couple of cups with Pittsburgh earlier in his career. I don't think he's certainly a lateral move from Gavrikov, not an improvement, that's for sure. But I don't think he's a huge drop-off from him as well. I think he can fill that second pairing position on the left side and do okay. I know some people have thought that he'd be on the third pairing. I don't think so. I think Joel Edmondson is probably a little bit better on that third pairing, and I think Dumoulin would fit in okay on the second pairing. And look, Gavrikov is a loss. There's no doubt. The defense is not better without him. But I think the Kings have such a defensive mindset and philosophy with their entire team. I mean, their forwards are very responsible defensively. So I think in that regard, because they're so strong as a team defensively, I think they can, cover up the loss of a Gavrikov a little bit easier than maybe another team could. So I think Dumoulin will be okay. It's not certainly, again, it's not an upgrade. It's not even a lateral move, but I don't think it's a huge drop off. So I'm okay with his signing.
That makes sense. And I'll ask you one more Gavrikov question, then we'll get into, more of the storylines, off-season storylines that the Rangers and Kings have been involved in. Do you have a favorite, Gavrikov moment on the Kings? Was there any, big moment that he made, big defensive play, clutch? I mean, I know he doesn't score a ton of goals, but anything along those lines that you thought was big or, made you jump out of your chair cheering for him?
Nothing really pops in my mind immediately from him, but again, I will say this. I don't remember any bad moments from him. I'll put it that way. It was always right place at the right time. The Kings do, I don't know how many other teams do this, but the Kings do this thing with their defensemen, the sliding on their stomach to block, the passing lane when a guy's in the corner or coming down the wing. And he does that really well. It's always, defensemen don't do a lot of kind of cool moves, when you think about it, unless it's somebody special like Cale Makar or Quinn Hughes or something like that. But I always love that move. And he does that really well where, it's like a 2-on-1 and he'll do that sliding move, go down on his stomach, take away the pass and completely kill the scoring chance. So that's a fun thing that he did a lot that I always enjoyed.
Well, it's good to know that he's good at that, because one of my critiques of this Ranger team last year, and specifically the defensemen, was that they went to that move just way too often. It's one thing if you're good at it and it's working and you can pull it off. But dude, the Ranger defensemen, the amount of times these guys went sliding across the ice on their stomach and just took themselves out of the play, it was bad. But if Gavrikov, if he's got that move in his pocket and he's actually good at it, then we'll take it. It'll be nice to see somebody actually pull it off.
It's funny. It's kind of funny you say that. Drew Doughty did that, tried to do that against Connor McDavid in the playoffs, and he looked like a complete fool. That was a really, really bad move. Don't do that against that guy. No, stay on your feet. What he wants you to go down on your stomach so he can skate it around the net and come out the other side or something. So yeah, when it works, it looks great. When it doesn't work, not so great.
Yeah, it's one thing when you're up against a bottom sixer, but when you're up against Connor, it's probably not the move to go to. Granted, I don't have a good strategy in defending him, but nevertheless, I think that applies. So yeah, we can keep everything rolling just a second. We'll get into a couple other off-season storylines here before we call it, and should be fun. All right, so we'll go ahead and wrap up this very special crossover edition here today. And Eddie, something I always think about anytime, Rangers and Kings are mentioned together, the entire Lafreniere, Quentin Byfield dynamic, because obviously several seasons ago, the number 1 and 2 picks in the draft. And, both have had their moments, but I don't think we've certainly gotten to the point where either one can really be considered a superstar. But I just want to get your take on Byfield, where he's at, and seems to be steadily getting better season after season. I know he dealt with some injuries early in his career, and that doesn't seem to be a problem anymore. But just your thoughts on Byfield and where he's at.
Yeah, I think if we were redrafting that draft, we'd both pick Tim Stützle for the first or second pick. I think he's clearly shown he's been the best player from that draft. But no, he's, I get why, and we've had the debate, especially, a couple years ago when Kings fans were losing their mind that this guy was a bust. And it's like, come on, he's young. Let's slow down a little bit, but I get it. A lot of fans are instant gratification. They want it right now. So he's coming along steadily. The reason why the Kings took him over Stützle was the size and the length that he has. You don't see players that can skate like him be that tall and that rangy. And so they thought he had a special kind of physicality to him that you just don't see every day. Last year, they moved him from wing to center. He's a natural center. And he took some time to adjust to that, I think, which I think is understandable. But he came on really strong in the last couple of months of the year and did a lot of special things. And if he can start off next season where he left off, I think he could have a really, really great year. And I think he would be well on his way to being the Kings' number 1 center. Obviously, Andrei Kopitar is going in the final year of his contract, and this will be his 20th NHL season. And he's still playing at a high level, but I think it's, there's a natural progression there of time for the young guy to kind of take the torch or baton or whatever and move into that role. I think this is the season, hopefully, for the Kings where they start to see that transition where Byfield becomes the center who's playing the most minutes. So I think there's realistic optimism with him. He does every once in a while do some pretty special things that show up on the highlight reel. I think he just needs to be a little bit more steady, right? A little bit more consistent, not just flashes here and there. If he can be steady and consistent for the whole season, then I think the Kings ultimately will be very happy with that draft pick.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's kind of a similar story with Lafreniere. That the frustrating thing about him is that, 2 seasons ago, it looked like he was breaking out. He's playing with Panarin, and obviously that's going to help right off the bat there. But that line, the two of them in Trocheck, that was one of the best lines in the NHL. And, once it got deep into the playoffs and the Rangers are against the Panthers and struggling to score against them, like every team struggles to score against them, he was the one guy that was like still a threat every single time he was on the ice. And man, then this past season started, he gets off to a great start. The Rangers do the extension, and it's very, very difficult to ignore the timing of when his play kind of tapered off a little bit relative to when he signed that extension, because it was pretty much right after that. And at first you're thinking like, all right, well, it's just a couple of games, like he's in a little bit of a slump or whatever. And then he just never really got out of it the rest of the season. Now, granted, just about every player on the Rangers took a step back this past season, but that was at least somewhat concerning. And, I think you're right. I mean, we can still support our guys. Like, I'm still going to support Lafreniere. I'm still going to want him to do well. I'm sure you're the same way with Byfield. But yeah, I mean, I think just about any GM, if you're doing the redraft and a GM has a number 1 pick, I think Stützle's probably the guy from last year's draft or from that season's draft.
I mean, to this point, he would have to be. Yeah. I think, like I said, I think the Kings, and I remember when there was that debate, who should the Kings take, Byfield or Stützle? I think all the scouting reports have been pretty spot on in that Stützle was going to be a guy who could come in right away and contribute, and Byfield was going to be a guy who was going to take some time. But the thinking was that ultimately, when it's all said and done, that Byfield might be the more dynamic player. Now that still has to be proven. And again, I think consistency goes a long way in that. If you're going to be a great player, it can't just be occasionally. It's got to be more often than not. And he hasn't proven that yet. But he has shown those flashes of skill that you just don't see, those special attributes. So just needs to figure it out, be more consistent, and hopefully he'll be okay. I did have a question I wanted to ask you, John.
Yeah.
Because a lot of Kings fans, when we were having contingency plans if Gavrikov doesn't come, talking about trading for Keandre Miller. And upon seeing what you guys got for him and the contract he signed with Carolina, I'm glad the Kings didn't do that. I was wondering how you felt about the Keandre Miller deal.
Well, I think, first of all, you are absolutely correct in being happy that the Kings did not pull off that move. I was shocked. I was saying for multiple times, not shocked that he was traded, obviously, but I was saying a couple of different times, Keandre Miller, what are the Rangers going to do with him? That was kind of a hot button topic coming into the offseason. And I was saying that I think they can get a first rounder for Miller, because when you look at the trade deadline this past season, I mean, you've got guys that are like decent players, but they're all getting like second round picks and like a second and a fourth or even a first. And I'm looking at all this. I'm like, man, like if this stays the way that it is now in the offseason, like, yeah, they can get a first rounder for Miller. And I would have signed up for that in about 2 seconds. But to get a first rounder, a second rounder, and Scott Morrow, who hasn't played a lot in the NHL, I think 16 games. But my understanding is he's a pretty good prospect for the Canes. And obviously now with the Rangers, I was blown away by that. And the crazy thing, too, is, the rumors start picking up that day after the Rangers signed Gavrikov that the Rangers and Canes are talking about Miller. And I'm thinking like, oh, they're going to trade him in division? Like, Drury hates trading guys even within conference. And my first instinct was, okay, well, that might say a lot about how the Rangers feel about where Miller's game is right now. But I think the bigger reason that deal was struck with the Canes is that massive haul that we got for him. And, I don't want to speak for every Ranger fan, but I think pretty overwhelmingly right now, most Ranger fans are completely in favor of that trade. Miller, early in his career, thought he looked great. First 2 years, I'm thinking like, man, give me this guy and Adam Fox for a decade plus, anchoring this blue line for the Rangers. The last season or two, and especially last year, it just tapered off. There's just times where it seems like his head's not in the game. a lot of like just critical mental mistakes at some really important parts in the game as well. I threw out the idea of the Rangers maybe bringing him back on a 1-year deal. I don't know how realistic that ever was, but dude, like Ranger fans hated that idea. Like I looked at the YouTube comments section and nobody was on board with that. So I think that'll give you an idea of like where Ranger fans were in terms of where Miller's game was. And honestly, man, like Miller could end up being a star. Stranger things have definitely happened, but what I saw last year was concerning. And honestly, I think you guys may have dodged a bullet, especially with that contract that he ended up signing.
Yeah, I think so too. And I have one other question for you. And
Sure.
there was the tampering thing came up with Mitch Marner in Vegas. That was a story for a little while. And so Kings fans were asking me, what about the Rangers? Can we file a complaint tampering, because we've all knew this was going to happen. It's been talked about, leading up to it. And then there he signs there. I'll just ask you, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts when you think somebody says something about that when it comes to Gavrikov?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I think it's hard to ever really prove it, right? Because, they're not supposed to talk to other players, but,
Mm-hmm.
it probably happens. And then isn't
Yes.
there even that short legal tampering period? Is that a thing in hockey? Where
Oh,
like right before free agency starts, you can, I don't know. Maybe I'm getting my sports mixed up here, but
yeah,
yeah.
I think it might be an NFL thing, but I have heard that the legal tampering window is open or something like that. So yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, Gavrikov might tell his friend that he's interested in being with the Rangers, and then he tells somebody, and then word spreads, and you know how fast news travels these days. It's kind of hard to keep a lid on everything. So, I mean, I don't think the Rangers overstepped. I don't think they broke any rules. I can't say for sure, but it's one of those things I think it'd be really, really difficult to prove that a team actually did that, if that makes sense.
No, it's 100%, and that's what I've said. It's really difficult to prove. Somebody has to be really stupid to get caught with
Yeah,
tampering.
yeah.
And they look, these people are smart. They're back channels. They know how to do this. And I understand, because when a guy signs, right away on July 1st, you're like, well, obviously this has been in the works. They've already talked about the numbers, and it's not like, we hit 9 a.m. or I guess it's noon Eastern time. I'm sorry, Pacific time, and the phones start ringing. These things are already in place. They know what's going on, and every team does it. So
Yeah.
I understand why some people might bring that up, but I agree with you. It's really hard to prove. These teams know how to work their way around it. And I don't think that the Rangers did anything that any other NHL team wouldn't do.
Yeah, it definitely happens to a degree, because otherwise, how could
Yeah,
you explain all these free agents signing
right.
just like a couple of minutes after free agency starts,
Of
right? So
course.
I think they get those deals, somewhat in place. But one more general hockey question I wanted to ask you about before we call it here: the current playoff format. You mentioned the Kings; they keep having to play the Oilers every season. I think it's 4 years in a row now,
It
and that
is.
obviously hasn't gone very well for the Kings. But be that as it may. I miss the 1 through 8 seeding. I feel like that's the way it should do. I feel like the NHL tried to fix something that wasn't broken. Whether it has to do with the Kings playing the Oilers or not, how do you feel about that? Are you 1 through 8, or do you like the current format?
I understand why they do it. And if they want to build rivalries, I can assure you there's no team that Kings fans hate more than the Edmonton Oilers.
Yep.
It would probably make more sense had this been a more competitive matchup. It's been so one-sided. I don't even know if Oilers fans want to see us the Kings anymore. You know what I mean? Because it's like we're just tired of seeing this. I'm a 1 through 8 guy. I'm also in favor of making the regular season count more. You know what I mean? I think that values the regular season more when it's 1 through 8, and so we won't see Dallas, Colorado, or Florida, Tampa Bay in the first round. As exciting as those first round matchups were, it's just not fair to the losing team. I mean, those are teams that should see a lesser opponent in the first round because they've earned that in the regular season. So I know that sometimes they'll say, well, it's the same matchups anyway, but not always. Like the Kings would not have played the Oilers this year if it was 1 through 8. I think they would have played Colorado. It's still a tough opponent, but I agree with you. I like 1 through 8 better. I think it mixes things up a little bit more. And like I said, I think it values the regular season a little bit more.
I agree. And you'll still get division matchups doing it that way. It's not like any division rivals aren't going to play each other in the first round. So that's good to know. I mean, I don't know. I guess Bettman likes it the current way, and I'm happy for him because
He
I'm
does.
convinced he's the only one at this point that likes it this way.
Well, he's supposedly going to be gone sometime soon. So maybe it'll change after that. But you're right. He's a big proponent of it, and he's behind it. So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, I figure we can call it there. But, Eddie, this was a ton of fun as always. And no schedule release yet. But when they play each other, these two teams, we'll have to do this again.
Sounds good. I really enjoyed it.
All right. Have a good one. And Raider fans, Kings fans, thank you guys as always. And we'll see you next time.